Now, more stories, insights, and analysis of Illinois policy and politics. This is Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Opportunity Project. Once again, your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Welcome back to Illinois Rising. I'm Pat Hughes of the Illinois Opportunity Project. Joining me is Brian Timpone. Brian, this week from the Chicago Sun-Times, advocates of preserving single-room occupancy housing in Chicago chalked up a big win Monday with the reopening of the restored Carling Hotel on the near north side. The Carling Hotel is, right in the middle of a very sort of, upscale, expensive neighborhood. It's the Gold Coast of Chicago. It's not far from the lake. I actually lived there and had an overpriced apartment when I was in law school and started practicing law. It's a 155-unit residential hotel that has now been turned into 80 single-room occupancy apartments. And the big thing about this wasn't done the way that you would think, where a developer would buy a project and he or she would go through zoning and they'd get equity investors. And I've been in this business for years. And then, you'd sell out the units to people or rent out the units to people and the market would dictate the cost. No, this was subsidized through the city of Chicago, who has no money, with a bunch of money from the city. And explain to the listeners, Brian, what is going on with the city of Chicago spending money they don't have to convert this, what was formerly a private, piece of property into this, new apartment building.
Right. When you talk about money in politics and how you get money out of politics, and we say if you want to get money out of politics, you have to make government smaller, because the bigger government gets, the more money has to go in to defend itself. And this is a perfect example of where government has no role, but they've created one, and they're creating constituencies and making people really rich, all under the idea that they're going to create affordable housing. Look, the Gold Coast, again, very wealthy area, and the city of Chicago has decided that they think a single-room occupancy affordable housing development needs to be there. So it's one thing for them to zone it and decide that. It's another thing for them to spend $27 million of taxpayer money to buy this building, which would ordinarily be, if it were a market rate development, it would have been luxury apartments. But they're going to spend $27 million of our money. They're going to give it to a developer who's going to make this money and get rich. That developer is then going to rent it to people who will vote for the politician who created it, Rahm Emanuel, he hopes. And then the developer will also kick campaign contributions to Rahm Emanuel for doing him the favor all the while.
And the alderman that also approved it, right?
Right, and wash, rinse, repeat. And by the way, the reason why this is so interesting to me is that it's celebrated in the local media like this is a great win for affordable housing. When our property taxes are going up for this, the neighborhood is actually worse off for it. If in my opinion, and it's also emblematic of what happens all over the state of Illinois, where the Illinois Housing Development Authority, which makes loans to these low-income developers, and these cities, they use government money to help favor developers build these affordable housing apartment complexes all over the suburbs, all over the city. They change the community. They put people in these communities who really aren't a part of the community. They create animosity. They drive down other people's property values. And it's just, all in all, a disaster.
So they say, you keep using the term affordable, right?
Right.
This is like free healthcare, right? What it really is it's subsidized, right? It's subsidized. And so it's the government picking winners and losers. It's the government, like you said, trying to set up a structure that ultimately benefits the people, that controls the lever of government. How does one become the developer who gets picked for this, right? Obviously, this is you're set up, right? You're subsidized. You get subsidized loans. You're going to be able to rent out the units. Why are you going to be able to rent out the units? Because you're renting them at a price so much below the market for the rest of that neighborhood that they're going to rent out, right? So who gets to be who gets the winning lottery ticket? Do they open up a chocolate bar and it's in there? How does this work?
Right. I mean, these are people who, when they start, from my research, have no development experience. They just
because you don't need any, Brian.
Right.
It's all. I mean, it's all set up. You don't need anything.
Right. And these, again, it's an untold story. These affordable developments, quote unquote, are all over the city, making people loaded rich who live in the North Shore in beautiful mansions, or not even in our state. and then they kick back the donations to the people who did them the favor. I mean, it's very common. And look, this is an example of creating a constituency, right? So you've seen this. It's a strategy. Put these in Republican areas in the suburbs, or put them in suburban areas where we can bring voters in to change the voting block. In like, for instance, like a Glendale Heights, which has seen a ton of these over the years in DuPage County. And it's what it really does, though, is it puts the people who accept these vouchers, it puts them in a tough spot, right? Hey, they accept the voucher; it's a good deal. They go out there, but they feel obliged to return the favor at the ballot box. And also, they're put in a situation where all of a sudden they're the subject of ire for the people who live next door, who are saying, "Hold on for a second, you just dropped 500 people in my community. They're overcrowding the school. They don't pay the same taxes. They're driving down our property values," and suddenly they're mad at them. And it's just a terrible thing for everyone but the developers.
Yeah, and it's interesting the comment you made about the North Shore, right? So
none of them up there, Pat.
Right, there's none of them up there. This is like when John Kerry wants wind farms everywhere, but where he can see it from his Cape Cod mansion or Martha's Vineyard mansion. The rent seekers, the wealthy rent seekers. This is like the J.B. Pritzker, who's a gazillionaire, billionaire, and then he goes and gets a property tax, change on his smaller mansion. It's this constant, endemic, sick, cyclical thing where power begets more power, and the people who are trying to live a productive life get squeezed in the middle.